Hey everyone, Stuart with Franklin Hill Ventures again, and welcome back. This is my weekly What Sold video where I break down my sales across multiple platforms and share my top flips of the week. And if you don't already know, I also co-host the Finders Flippers Resell Podcast along with Wes from the Slim Flippers and Johnny from Frizzy's Finds. Definitely check it out and subscribe if you want some reseller talk with a side of laughs. We have a lot of fun and we also have some great special guests. For the week of August 24th through August 30th, I had 20 online sales spread across eBay, Etsy, and Facebook Marketplace, plus one local sale to another dealer at one of my antique malls. Those online sales plus the local sale totaled $645.59 in revenue with a profit of $372.47, which works out to about a 57% profit margin. A little bit slower than last week, but it was a week leading into a holiday weekend, and I figure a lot of people were at cookouts or traveling instead of shopping for things like vintage ephemera in China. Let me know in the comments how your week was overall. Was it better or worse than most weeks? And do you think the fact it was a holiday weekend factored in? On top of that, I had $428 in boost sales, which gave the week a nice boost. And between my online sales and my boosts, around $214 came from consignment items. So once again, a big thanks to Molly, Samantha, and Libby over at Consignment Chats. I know they'd be proud of me for working consignment into the mix. Make sure you subscribe to those ladies on YouTube. You can just search Consignment Chats on YouTube. So altogether, my sales went out to buyers in 15 different states, with multiple sales headed to Tennessee for the second week in a row, Florida, and Virginia. It's always fun to see vintage finds scatter all across the country. And just a quick note, one of the ways I'm able to sell on multiple platforms is by using List Perfectly to cross-post my inventory. If you've been thinking about trying it out, you can always get 30% off your first month with the code FHV. You can find the link to that in the show notes. Oh, and before we get into the countdown, it's time for a new segment, my weekly Depop update. And once again, I sold a grand total of $0. But hey, one of these weeks I'll actually have something to report, and you'll hear the celebration right here. So with that, let's jump in and count down my top 10 most profitable sales of the week. Coming in at number 10 is a vintage glass ashtray from the Royal Sonesta Hotel in New Orleans, dating to around 1969 or 1970, and I based that on the graphics and the fact that it had HCA hotels on it, which that name went away in about 1970. I picked this one up for just $3 along the Tennessee stretch of the US 127 World's Longest Yard Sale, and it sold on Etsy for $24.53. And after fees and shipping, I cleared a profit of $15. This one went down to Florida to start its next chapter. And just a quick note on ashtrays, they can't be listed on Facebook Marketplace or Depop. Neither allows any kind of tobacco related items. So Etsy, eBay, Mercari, or Poshmark are your best bets for moving these pieces. And really the best odds of selling, in my experience, have been eBay or Etsy. Coming in at number 9 is another find from the US 127 World's Longest Yard Sale, and it's also another Etsy sale. It's a vintage Mackinac Island souvenir plate. Now, these souvenir plates are honestly one of my favorite things to sell, and it's not because they bring in big money, because they don't, but it's because they're just so cool and interesting. I always pick up state or travel souvenir plates if I can grab them for $3 or less, and a lot of times you can even find them at yard sales for a buck or less. This particular one sold for $25.16, and after fees and shipping, the profit came out to $16. Not a huge flip, but a fun and an easy one. It sold quick, and I never get tired of sourcing these. At number 8, we've got another Etsy sale, making it 3 in a row from that platform, and this one was a vintage Walt Disney World Magic Kingdom trinket dish from the 1970s. It sold for $28.34, and after fees and shipping, I profited $16.41. I picked this up at a thrift shop that I pop into almost every day when I'm dropping off packages at the post office. Thrift shops are not my primary way of sourcing anymore, but I still enjoy stopping in, and at this point, I feel a little like Norm from Cheers because everybody knows my name when I walk in the door, and I do find enough there to make it worthwhile, especially books and band shirts, which are perfect for stocking my booth. And occasionally I'll find a shirt like this one that I keep for myself, this Grateful Dead t shirt. So at number 7, we're sticking with another thrift shop pickup, but this time the sale moves over to eBay. It was a 1955 illustrated Treasury of Literature book, and it still had its original slipcover. And this one sold for $32, and after fees and shipping, I cleared a profit of $18. Now, while I didn't have this exact book as a kid, I did have a very similar one, and it brought back a lot of great memories of reading fairy tales, nursery rhymes, and other kids' stories with my mom. And now, as the title suggests, it's full of beautiful illustrations, which makes it a really appealing book for both readers and collectors alike. So at number 6, we're moving over to Facebook Marketplace with another pickup from the US 127 World's Longest Yard Sale. This one was a vintage ceramic souvenir stein and it had a Boston theme, the city, not the band. Although, if I ever find a Boston the band stein, you better believe I'm going to grab that. In fact, just this last week, I sold a Boston latchhook rug that somebody I know had made. It was a consignment deal, but that thing was awesome. Anyway, this was a front porch pickup, so there were no shipping costs or platform fees. And while I don't make a huge number of local pickup sales on Facebook Marketplace, it's definitely been worth it for me to offer that as an option. I almost always do front porch pickups rather than meeting somewhere, which makes it not as big a deal if someone no shows. I know some people hesitate to do porch pickups because of safety concerns, but the truth is, buyers can already see your profile and address through Facebook Marketplace anyway. And the flip side is, you can also look at their profile, and if you see any red flags, you can make other arrangements. The stein sold for $24, and outside of the $3 cost of goods sold, the rest was profit. I'd love to hear from you. How do you handle local pickup sales? Do you do front porch pickups, meet somewhere, or do you just skip them altogether? Anyway, drop your comment below and let me know. So that's the halfway point in the countdown, and we've already covered everything from ashtrays and souvenir plates to books, Disney collectibles, and even a local pickup stein. And remember, for the week, I had 20 online sales totaling $645.59 in revenue, along with $372.47 in profit. Plus, adding another $428 in boost sales. And don't forget, $214 roughly of that came from consignment items. And then plenty of variety this week, and we're just getting to the top 5, so let's keep going. At number 5, we've got another book and another eBay sale, and this one is a 1997 first edition of Knights of Spain, Warriors of the Sun, signed by the author Charles Hudson. This book came from that online auction lot of 8 shelves of books that I mentioned last week, so the cost of goods sold in it was very low, probably less than $1. It sold for $40, and after fees and shipping, my profit was $25.48. And just as a reminder, all of my eBay sales do ship free, and I use that same strategy on Mercari, Knickknacks, Facebook Marketplace, and Depop. On Etsy, I use true calculated shipping, and then on Poshmark and whatnot, they both have their own flat rate systems built in. At number 4, we have a pretty unique piece. It's a Vatican souvenir bronze medal of Pope John Paul II, celebrating when he became Pope in 1979. And even better, it still had its original case with it. It was a velvet case, had the Vatican logo on the cover, and this was a pickup from a Whatnot show where I do some sourcing, not a ton, but occasionally I'll drop in shows and have found some pretty good things to sell there. I turned around, sold it on eBay for $40, and had a final profit of $28.07. It does make me wonder, with the recent new Pope, has there been a bump in demand for Catholic related items? Uh, I think I've seen that over the past month. I've seen several religious themed items move, including this medal, a brass crucifix, and even the item we're going to show here at number 3 in a second. And as I mentioned last week, religion in general definitely sells, and I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever sold religious items? And if so, what's been your best flip? At number 3, we do have another religious themed item, like I just mentioned, and this time it's sold on Etsy, and it's a 1954 Catholic prayer book, and it's filled with beautiful illustrations. I picked this one up at an estate sale for $3, and it sold for $37.97 with a profit of $29.75. For me, estate sales have been a great place to source books because a lot of the companies around here, they price them all the same. It doesn't matter if it's a modern paperback or hardback or something with real collectible value. And it's just another reminder, as I mentioned a second ago, that religion sells, and prayer books like these can be strong performers, especially when they have great artwork like this one did. At number two, we have a really interesting piece of history. Now, this came from a local online auction purchase that I made of a large frame shadow box. It was filled with various antique and vintage ephemera, had arrowheads, other odds and ends. Some of the items, unfortunately, had issues that made them where I couldn't sell them because they were glued in or taped in. But most of the ephemera, fortunately, was attached with staples, and they weren't stapled through in most cases, just the corners were kind of stapled down. So I was able to salvage quite a bit. One of the best finds was a pair of 1863 Fluvanna County, Virginia 25-cent notes. Hope I said that right. Fluvanna or Fluvana. If you're from Virginia, let me know if I butchered that. But it was issued, they were issued in Palmyra, Virginia. And based on what I paid for the whole shadow box, my cost of goods sold in these came out to probably less than $1 for each item, and these sold on eBay for $40, and after fees and shipping, I profited $30.84. And not surprisingly, these notes ended up going right back to Virginia. So, a quick bit of history on these. I did a little research, and during the Civil War, there was a shortage of coins, especially small change. So, counties, cities, and private businesses would issue their own paper currency, often called script, to keep commerce moving. For example, these were the 25-cent ones, like I mentioned, and they were printed on like old deposit slips or something like that. But anyway, they weren't official U.S. notes and they were only accepted locally, but they are fascinating pieces of Confederate era history. So we're finally at number one, my most profitable sale of the week, and it's a set of 4 original Red Cross posters from World War II. I picked these up at the same estate sale where I found the Catholic prayer books that we saw back at number three, and I paid $8 for all 4 posters, and they each measure 30 by 20 inches, and I think I had them listed for 160, but I accepted an offer of 150 on eBay. And after cost of goods sold, fees, and shipping, my profit came out to $97.89. The posters each carried various humanitarian themes. One showed some children receiving shoes, another a worker assisting a family, another had a wounded soldier playing checkers, and then one was a patriotic campaign that urged Americans to support the Red Cross. This was an incredible set of history and a perfect example of why I love finding estate sale items like this. So before we wrap up, I did want to start highlighting my lowest profit item of the week because let's be honest, not every sale is a home run. And this week it was an American Express Wells Butterfield and Company brass belt buckle that I picked up at my favorite thrift shop that I mentioned earlier. I probably to begin with overpaid a little bit at $4, but I thought it was cool, and I originally listed this for $18, which would have made me a profit. But in the moment of weakness, I guess, I took an offer of $12, and that only left me with $8 to try to work with for a profit. And after fees, shipping, and packing material, I did make a profit, but it probably ended up only being about 40 cents. So while I never regret making sales, and at least I didn't lose money on this one, I probably should have either countered on it or just waited a little longer since it hadn't been listed that long. Oh well, it's gone from my inventory and it's on its way to its new home in Louisiana. So how about you? Did you sell anything this week that was a low profit flip? Drop it in the comments so that we can all laugh and learn together. And that wraps up my week of sales from August 24th through August 30th. In total, I had 20 online sales across eBay, Etsy, and Facebook Marketplace for $645.59 in revenue, $372.47 in profit, which is around a 57-58% margin. Add in $428 in boost sales. Turned out to be a okay week, even with the holiday slowdown. And a big thank you to everyone who bought from me this week and to all of you watching. A special thank you to everyone who watched last week's episode. The video ended up, as of the time I'm recording this, it's brought in over 400 views and I think 8 new subscribers. I really appreciate the support as I get this series off the ground. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What was your favorite sale of mine? And what was your best flip of the week? And don't forget to share your own low profit stories too so we can all learn from each other. And also, as a quick reminder, one of the tools that helps me stay on top of selling across multiple platforms is List Perfectly. And if you want to give it a try, you can get 30% off your first month with the code FHV. And of course, last but not least, if you enjoy reseller talk and a few laughs, check out the Finders Flippers Resell Podcast, which I co-host with Wes from the Slim Flippers and Johnny from Frizzy's Finds. And if you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, Click the bell so you don't miss next week's What's Sold. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.